The first lesson in this unit is trigonometry in right angle triangle. So this is basically what we just reviewed, but it's going to be a little bit more detailed. Okay. So just to recall, right triangles have a right angle which is a 90-degree angle. Right? The sum of all angles equal to 180 degrees. Capital letter equals angles, and lowercase letter equal sides. If two sides are known, use Pythagorean theorem to solve for the third. To find the third side that's written, but what's the Pythagorean theorem? Yeah. And then remember there's 3 versions of it, right? This is one of the versions. The other version is if you're looking for the other sides, not the hypotenuse, which is a squared equals c squared minus b squared, or b squared equal c squared minus a squared. Other than the Pythagorean theorem, we can use the primary trigonometric ratio. So you're going to see the word primary trig ratios or trig ratios multiple times. Make sure that you know what that word means. So when it says primary trig ratios, you're looking for sine, cosine, and tan. Okay, this is what it means. So sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse. Right, because it's so. Cosine theta is adjacent over hypotenuse because it's ka. And then TOA is opposite over adjacent, and that represents tan. Are we okay with this? Okay. These can only be used with right angle triangle, and make sure that your calculator is in degree mode. We talked about how to name it. Okay. So always it depends on the angle of interest, right? You name the triangle. So if this is your angle of interest right here, then that way makes this your opposite, this your adjacent, and the hypotenuse is not going to change. Right, it's going to be the one across from the 90 degree. And then if this is your angle of interest, hypotenuse is going to stay the hypotenuse. This becomes your opposite, and then the other side is your adjacent. Okay? So when you're solving to find a side measure, these are the steps that you need to take. So you're going to label the opposite hypotenuse side according to the angle of interest. You're going to choose which trig ratio to use given the sides you have and want. Write the formula down, plug in the information, the values, solve using your calculator. And the important part here is I want you to always round sides to the nearest 1 decimal. Okay? Sides nearest 1 decimal. If it tells you or if it doesn't tell you what you need to round it to, you're going to round it to the nearest 1 decimal for sides. Okay, let's look at some examples here. So I have a right angle triangle, and it's asking you to find the measure of side P. And then it tells you that angle P is 60 degrees. So I know that this angle right here is 60 degrees. And where's side P? It's this side, right? This is side P. Because remember that a side is named according to the angle opposite to it. All right. So what's my angle of interest? Which one is my angle of interest? P, right? The 60 degrees. That's the one that's given to me. Remember, 90 degrees is never your angle of interest. Okay? So your angle of interest is 60 degrees. According to the angle of interest, which one is the hypotenuse, adjacent, and opposite? So this is your hypotenuse, yeah? P is the opposite. And then the adjacent is the third side. Okay? I am looking for this side. So I'm looking for the opposite. And which one do I know? The hypotenuse, right? So I know the hypotenuse. I'm looking for the opposite. So which trig ratio do I use? Sine. Okay, so sine P is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. And the reason why I chose sine, because I'm looking for the opposite and I know the hypotenuse. So these are the two interested, the one I'm interested in. So that's sine 60 equal to opposite over 225. What do I do to look for the opposite? Okay, you can find sine 60, then what do you do? How do I isolate for the opposite? I need to get rid of the 225, yes? Because I want the opposite by itself. So I have to bring the 225 over. What does it become here? Multiply. Because the opposite of division is multiplication. Yes? So I have to bring the 225 over. It becomes a multiplication. So it's 225 times sine 60, which is 194.9 feet. Make sure that you include the units in your final answer. And if it's a word problem, you must include a therefore statement. Are you guys okay with this part? So in this triangle, your angle C is your right angle. It's asking you to solve for side B, knowing that angle A is 74. And side B is right here. This is the one I'm looking for. Okay, angle of interest is the 74. Where's my opposite hypotenuse and adjacent? Forty is the opposite, yeah. That's the adjacent. And then the AB is your hypotenuse. All right, perfect. So, which side do I know which side I'm looking for or I'm interested to find, and what trig ratio do I use? Tan? Yes, because I know the opposite, I am looking for the adjacent. So O and A. Tan is the one that has O and A. So tan A is equal to opposite over adjacent. What do I plug in? So instead of A, I'm going to put tan 74 equals to 40 over the adjacent. So I'm looking for the adjacent. How do I isolate for it? Bring the 40 over. How can I bring the 40 over if it's on the top? And is this one of the questions that you guys got stuck on? So remember that whatever you're looking for is in the denominator. Okay? The adjacent is in the denominator. In order for me to isolate for that adjacent, I have to bring it over to this side first and then divide by tan 74. Okay? So first bring the adjacent over because you can't have whatever you're looking for in the denominator. You can't solve it. So bring it over. This is one of like the examples that we did yesterday. When we were solving. Okay? Now, to isolate for the adjacent, I can divide by tan 74. So it's two-step here. Okay? Bring the adjacent over first, then divide by tan 74. I sometimes refer to it as you're switching spots, right? You bring the adjacent to the top, you bring the tan 74 to the bottom, but these are the actual steps for it, okay? So now I have 40 divided by tan 74, so that gives me 11.5. Centimeter. You get it? So anytime whatever you're looking for is in the denominator, that's what you have to do. You're okay?
So you're not physically carrying anything over, you're just writing the base and then dividing.
By 1074. I'm cross multiplying the adjacent with the 1074, and then I'm dividing the 1074, 40 by 1074. I'm doing two steps. Okay? First of all, I'm getting rid of the adjacent because it's divided by adjacent. When I bring it over, it becomes multiplied by adjacent. Okay? And to get rid of the 1074, because this is a multiplication here, then I have to divide by 1074 when I bring it over. Yeah? Now, in this case, I was given an angle, I was given a side, and I was looking for another side. Okay? Now, sometimes they give you two sides and they want you to find an angle, like we did in the previous in the review. Okay? So anytime you are looking for an angle, you're going to have to use the inverse button on the calculator. Okay? This is whenever you're looking for an angle. Okay? So again, it's the same idea. You're going to have to label your triangle. You're going to have to look for your angle of interest. You're going to choose a formula. you're going to substitute, right? But in this case, you're going to have to do the inverse. Okay? So you either do sine inverse, tan inverse, or cos inverse to find the angle. All right? So find the measure of angle B, and we know that angle C is our right angle here. So you're looking for angle B. So this is my angle of interest, right? Remember, angle of interest is the one that's given to you or the one that you are looking for. So let's name the triangle. Where's your hypotenuse, adjacent, and opposite? So AB is the hypotenuse, yeah. CB is the adjacent, yeah. And this is the opposite, yes? All right. So which two sides do I know? The adjacent and the opposite. So which trig ratio do I use? Tan. So tan angle B equals to the opposite, which is 8. You know what? I'm going to write the formula first. So opposite over adjacent, just to get you used to do that. Tan B equals to, the opposite is 8 over 13. So this is where, because I'm looking for an angle, I have to do the inverse. And tan inverse of 8 over 13. That gives me 31.6 because this is an angle, so it has to be to the nearest degree. So it's going to be 32 degrees. Are we okay with that? I'm just going to quickly explain one more thing, and I want you to do the other two questions that we have on in this lesson. Okay. Two things that I want to introduce to you are the words angle of elevation and angle of depression. Okay. So these are two terminologies that you will see a lot in word problems. Okay. And the important part for the angle of elevation and angle of depression is that they are measured from the horizontal line. Okay? You always measure an angle of elevation and angle of depression from the horizontal line. It's an imaginary line that you can draw. Okay? So let's say I'm standing right here and I'm looking at the clock. And if I say I'm looking at the clock at an angle of elevation of 20 degrees, right? That angle of elevation is measured from a horizontal line coming out of my eyes, okay? And then I draw a line that goes to the clock, and that angle right there, right, that's going up, is my angle of elevation. Okay? So coming out of your eyes is an imaginary horizontal line, okay? Then you draw a line from your eyes to the object, and this angle right here is your angle of elevation. Okay? Angle of depression is similar idea. So I'm standing right here and I'm looking down at the wheel, right? So again, I'm going to have to draw a horizontal line coming from my eyes, and then I will draw a line coming from my eyes to the object, and that is your angle of elevation, of depression. Okay? So you have to be careful when you're reading the question. When it says angle of elevation, it is measured from the horizontal line. Okay? Even if it doesn't exist, you're going to have to draw it. Okay? It's an imaginary line. So here's what I want you to do in the meanwhile so there's two more questions in this lesson. I want you to do this question. This is your 90-degree angle right here. S. Okay, so I want you to solve for angle R and angle T. So there's two questions here. and then attempt to do this example. Okay? So before I